Speaking of football, Chronic, week one is underway of camp. We know little to nothing about the offense, and um, we will continue to know little to nothing about the offense. Met with running backs coach yesterday, Sean Shivers, those guys. But there's just a lot of questions with this program, and I understand the secrecy because to me their season relies on that very first game with Illinois. They have to win the very first game. Otherwise, those other 11 just got way tougher. So they want to give them zero, which I'm not sure what they could get. Because you've got a new offensive coordinator, a new quarterback in that room, new running backs in that room. There's so much new. I'm not sure what they could even get. But I understand there's a lot of pressure on Tom Allen.
Yeah, there's no doubt. This is I hate talking in hyperbole when it comes to make or break or do or die. This is certainly not what we would traditionally from the start of the season. If Tom Allen doesn't make a bowl, he's fired. We're nowhere near that. I think Tom Allen still has plenty enough goodwill that he's safe in the job for now. All that being said, last year was massively disappointing on a number of different levels. Whether or not he's able to turn the page, I think will shape the narrative of his remaining career here at IU this season. I don't think it's going to be the determinative season, but I think this is the pivot point for the season. Whether he's able to get it turned around or whether or not the disappointment lingers. I don't know that Illinois is necessarily the make or break game for the season, but it sure does a number on fan engagement, on enthusiasm, just on momentum in general. To have a Big Ten game on a Friday night in September, it's a later start. It's an odd start for a night game in conference on a Friday night. With two very winnable games following, you can either head to Cincinnati 3-0 with a whole lot of optimism and a probably I don't know that it'd be a complete erasure of the memories of last season, but it would go a long way to help fans forget that and help remind fans why they want to show up to Memorial Stadium when the weather starts to get not as nice. That said, you very well could go in there with a lot of doubt and skepticism, having dropped a winnable home opener, and who knows what happens on the road at Western Kentucky. Nevertheless, though, I think it would be a massive missed opportunity if Indiana's not able to capitalize on a win that game, because that very well at the balance of the season could determine whether or not Tom Allen's talking about bowl eligibility or whether or not we're talking about a second season where the Hoosiers just failed to meet that expectation.
Well, Dustin, when I talk about them winning that game, if they win that game, they have the opportunity to start the season 4-0. Even though that game at Cincinnati will be tough, they'll have momentum. If they're at that point, they will have momentum and obviously playing well enough to have a shot in that game, which would be a gigantic difference. You lose that game, it just changes a lot of things for me.
Well, last year I would have pointed to the Iowa game and said, I thought going into the season, we all thought that was a very winnable game for Indiana. Obviously, that did not play out the way many of us had thought. But you also believe that if Indiana lost that game, it wasn't the end of the season. It was not a division opponent. It was week one. There was plenty of time. There was plenty of meat left on the schedule to turn things around and get back to bowl eligibility or be competitive in the Big Ten East. Usually I would agree with Chronic's point that the first game of the season may not be the make or break point, but the way I look at it is if you can't beat Illinois, then who on the schedule are you going to be able to beat?
Yep. Now, when you look down the schedule and what games does Indiana have a reasonable chance of winning, especially once you get into the conference portion of it, Illinois has to be at the top of that list. So to start the season with them, there's only so many games that I think the average fan would, or the neutral fan rather, would consider IU competitive in. And to bank those 4 games early, even 3 games early. I'm literally just getting done with a session with our financial planner, talking about college investments for my kids, and just having reiterated the importance of of getting those deposits in early, because the dividends they pay off late is so much larger. And for an Indiana team that could go potentially 4-0 in September, you would be putting so much in the bank for the balance of the season. I think it's just from the health of the program, to know that they've got a little bit of cushion, and to take some of the weight of the season off their shoulders. Because honestly, there's got to be a recognition, even though nobody's willing to acknowledge it within the locker room. There's a lot at stake this season for this team, and I think a lot of those guys are invested in its success. But they have to know just how badly they need to rack up some wins. And there's 4 perfectly winnable games before the degree of difficulty gets far, far more difficult for them.